Automation nation, automation nation, automation nation, around the nation. Automation nation, automation nation, automation nation, around the nation, around the nation, around the nation. Welcome to the Automation Nation podcast, the show for business leaders, tech aficionados, and those who are just simply curious about where technology and business are going. Automation Nation is your gateway to understanding automation, AI, and the future of business. Don't get left behind. Tune in now and subscribe for more. Welcome to the Automation Nation podcast, everybody. We are back for another fantastic episode, Automation Conversation. That's right, I got my guests here, Rafael Casas and Wesley Hartman. We were going to have Wilton Rogers, but he's unable to make it, but he's here with us in spirit. And also, I got a couple questions that people who saw this post coming out, they have some questions that they already sent me that we're going to get answered. And by the way, if you're watching this and you have a question, don't be afraid to ask it. You can ask it because it can get answered. Because the only dumb question is the one you didn't ask that you needed the answer to, but you never asked the question, so you never got it. Rafael Casas, Wesley Hartman, how you doing, my brothers? Welcome to the actual first automation roundtable. Now, this roundtable, I know it's only 3 of us today, but it's still round. We are round here in the virtual world, and we're going to go around in conversation. And from this conversation, our goal is to help you level up your understanding when it comes to technology and automation and AI and accounting. And because these brothers here, these two gentlemen, I'm not having to give a breakdown of who they are, but they've dedicated their lives to helping firms, helping accountants to do better, to understand automation, understand technology, how to do better processing, how to get things done better, faster, save stress. I mean, these are all good, positive things. So without further ado, Rafael, why don't you go first, let folks know who you are and what you do, and then you can pass the baton over to Wesley.
Awesome, thanks. No, it's an honor always to be here, especially with a peer like Wesley. Wesley is amazing. But I'm Rafael Casas, head of partnerships and alliances at QuickFee. Been working in the technology side of the accounting profession for almost 20 years, from consulting, architecture to head of ops for companies within the same space as well. So it's just good to be here and really just help support and bring knowledge to the profession any way we can.
Wonderful. Wesley, how did you get into this space? Give folks a little bit about who you are.
So hey everyone, my name is Wesley. I have an engineering background, but I spent 15 years being the director of technology at an accounting firm. So I've been through tax seasons and helped with audits and cash work and all that other stuff. But on the technology side, bringing kind of my engineering mindset to a firm to try to automate and streamline as much technology as possible.
That's it. As much as possible, as efficient as possible. And it brings us to our first discussion point of the day, because this is very interesting. We know automation, and most folks who don't even know about automation have an idea that it's a good opportunity. But identifying those opportunities could be where the crutch is. And so I want to get your expert opinions from both of you gentlemen. What is the best way to identify even automation opportunities within your firm?
I guess I'll jump on that one first, if you don't mind, Rafael. So I always look at, as far as automations go, like identify any processes that are standard and repeatable, like things that you're doing on a daily basis, weekly basis, even on an annual basis, but on a large scale. And those are really the best places to begin to create automations that will automate that process so that you don't have to do it anymore. And I would also say, like, don't just come up with your own ideas. Also, ask your staff, ask other firms what they're automating or kind of what processes and pain points they find. Because I think I find automation is more of a collaborative process to find the work that can be removed from a person up and down the firm and given to an automation, a bot, a task workflow automation.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think it really comes down like holistic approach of collaboration. One thing I think that when RPA came out and made a lot of waves within the profession, there's those mining bots that were really valuable because there was a lot of times that folks within firms or businesses didn't even recognize that these were just really mundane tasks they were working on, or they were just doing things out of nature and doing it for so many years. And so those had been quite beneficial in determining what can be something that can be automated. But it really is collaboration because most of the time, those folks that are doing these types of tasks that can be automated are just, they don't even have the time to necessarily start saying, hey, these are things I would love to automate. It's really spending from a top down, spending time with those folks and getting their buy-in and getting their knowledge. This small little task that I'm doing takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and I don't want to do it anymore. And so there's a lot of it is just, again, spending time and trying to learn and observe what's going on within the business.
That's good.
And I'll throw in on top of that, there was just as we were talking about this, it reminds me, one of the things that the partners at the firm I was at, it was always interesting because he'd walk into my office and he'd start with, "Is there a way?" Right, and then that kind of really kicks off that collaborative process. Okay, what are you trying to do? And then building off of that. So he'd walk into my office and say, "Is there a way to take all this rental information that this group of clients sends in, and automatically enter that into a tax return?" And hence, Raphael's mentioning of RPA, that was a great RPA automation use case.
Asking the right questions. So bringing folks together and asking those right questions, to get deeper into the understanding of what you need to actually do.
And some of those, I was going to say, some of those firms formalize, those types of collaboration with technology committees or innovation committees. And so not everyone has the capacity or ability to do that, but it's always really good to just have an open mind, and anything that has it as a challenge, there's an opportunity to automate there.
I like that. Challenges are opportunities. Instead of being turned down by the challenges, look at the upside, because if there's a challenge, there's an opportunity on the other side of that door, potentially, is what you're saying here. Well, what type of automations? And let's talk about some of those, built in off the shelf. Let's talk about some of that. Wesley, you can take this first.
Yeah, sure. So I like to divide automations really kind of into three buckets, right? So there's what I call built-in automations. And those are automations that either are part of your existing technology stack or part of maybe a product that you really just kind of need to purchase, right? So, something like QuickFee, to help you shore up that part of your business. But even little simple things that people don't think are a form of automation. For example, just making email templates. If you're finding yourself sending the same email over and over again, in Outlook, you can make an email template, and every time a client asks that question, or you need to send like a standard email, just double click on it and add the email address, and then click send. You don't have to copy and paste for different things. Off the shelf are the products like Zapier or Make.com, where those products have built-in integrations with different platforms. And then, sometimes they're called low code, no code systems. So you can then build kind of like workflows to drag and drop items and connect up systems. For example, when something gets signed in DocuSign, automatically download the file and put it into SharePoint. And then the third thing, I like to categorize as automation specialists. And that's where you're kind of reaching out, either because maybe As Rafael was talking about, maybe you don't have the bandwidth and you really just kind of want to work with someone and collaborate that has, the specialization in automation. But then that specialist can also bring additional ideas and then take all that information and help you enact your automation vision for your business.
Mm.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think those are really, really great points, and those are all things you have to be looking at. With it just depends, the size of the firms, size of the businesses are going to have different types of, they're going to look at automation a little bit differently in the sense of if they've got, the Workday, Sages, and the NetSuites of the world, they have business process automation or business process management that's inside of the system that allows you to build out workflows, utilizing what exists within that core system already. A lot, from an kind of an antiquated standpoint, that's where tools like RPA come in, where there's not a native integration that kind of help fill those gaps for companies. Like the SAPs from Zapier are really helpful. Power Automate are really helpful. From digital hygiene, that's from emails or kind of document storage, things like that. Those are going to be kind of low hanging fruit and be really helpful. But it's also, there's a lot of pillars that you kind of want to think about before automating. You really want to spend time on that process. It could be a process that maybe a certain part of the business owns that shouldn't own it, or it should be just a process should be dead. You shouldn't have that process anymore. So you don't want to automate something. You really want to spend time. I think the automation technology part isn't necessarily the most valuable, although that's the end result. And I know Wesley can probably attest to this, but you have to spend time on, are these things actually valuable enough to automate and spend time to automate and use? Okay, some of those things take licenses, they cost. Is it really going to make us profitable? Is it really going to help from a mental standpoint? Some of these things, like what are all the issues at month end? How many hoops are we running at month end? Can we automate some of this stuff? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you want the automation to bring value from data integrity as well. So I think it gets kind of deep. I mean, you go into so many layers. Like I know, I'm sure Wesley, when he's doing these kind of assessments, there's so many different layers that you get into, and at that time, it's a pruning process. So.
Yep, certainly is. Sean said analyzing the current state of processes is definitely critical. Totally agree. That's right, Sean. Thanks for your comment too. When you're approaching this, another thing is like, so there's a mindset and there's a certain type of approach when it comes to adopting these technologies, these new technologies. We talked a little bit about it, coming together, speaking more, having clarity amongst the team, understanding your process clearly. Obviously these are very important before you implement any kind of technology. But what else? What would be some good best practices when you're approaching, implementing new technology?
So our friends at Carbon actually came out with a really good process playbook, and it aligns with some of the 5 pillars that I've seen successful in accounting firms or even just any business looking at type of process automation or any of that. And it was the 5 pillars was profitability, talent management, the productivity that comes out of it, the team alignment, because that's always important. And that one you can really double click on because the cross collaboration, you want to automate something in a different part of a department that could affect negatively another area that you had no clue. So it's always good to have that team alignment, that this is what's going to be an upstream, downstream effect. And then client satisfaction at the end of the day, you want to make sure this is something that could potentially negatively or positively impact the client satisfaction, the client experience. So those are kind of some of the pillars that you would look at, in my opinion.
And then, I mean, one thing when I was at the firm and we were implementing new technology, I definitely think one important thing to have within your business is basically a technology champion, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a dedicated IT technology person. It could be just someone within your firm that has, that is basically given responsibility to implement whatever maybe new technology or some along those lines. That's one thing whenever because I'm a technology person, right? I'm not a CPA, I'm not an accountant, so I don't have necessarily some of those perspectives. So whenever we implemented new technology, right, that collaboration, if we were implementing something more on the audit side of things, what would happen is the auditor, like maybe the partner in charge of audit, would come give me kind of, hey, we want to look at these types of products. But then I really kind of am a facilitator, and I part of the implementation team is some auditors. They become part of, and I just become a champion to be like, whether it's doing the technical work of creating user accounts and connecting up the systems to our existing tech stack, or just helping facilitate communication between the vendor, the audit team, and myself being on the technology side. Again, it goes back to collaboration, but having a champion that really kind of is the focus of adopting that one, let's just assume it's like one specific application, right? Whether it's a PBC tool for your audit side or a new practice management software. And that champion becomes basically your power user that learns everything about the product, so that internally they can make sure all your internal processes will follow along with the new product.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Great.
think it's good to have those champions, and essentially can be many times they're called like product owners as well within the business, because they're you're looking at internal tech stacks as the product and making sure that those are working well together. But you know, a lot of times though, you see that, well, you as a champion and going in and facilitating these things, you see that you uncover way more, way more dead bodies, way more things that, so you're like, this is great, we want to do this, but a lot of the value comes from us uncovering and going through this process analysis. I've uncovered 10 things that we are problems that are much, foundationally bigger issues. So a lot of that process analysis uncovers a lot of really good stuff to help your
Hmm.
firm and your business be able to implement these things much more frictionlessly and have a documented plan of, from a change management standpoint. Wesley does an amazing job at facilitating that. There's Corey and Dan Gertrudes with Growth Lab that have streams that are helping automate and help build business process analysis for firms as well. So outsourcing is another area that's going to be important. But you uncover a lot in that tech stack analysis. And to Wesley's point, when I, as an architect and doing these ops side of the house, I'd always come at it as scarcity, not being pessimistic, but like, I'm okay. There's always these cool new things that come out, but that's marketing and sales. To me, I want to see what it really does and what it really fails on, because everyone is using those types of products and automation tools in different ways, and they have some of them have wonky processes that are specific to their industry. So it takes a lot of time and testing and collaboration to get those things up and running well.
So true. So true. And we actually kind of talked about, you guys answered this question already. Were there any other elements you want to add, Wesley, to how you would kind of analyze your current tech stacks? Because there's a process. There's
Oh
a
yeah.
process.
Yep. I mean, and to Raphael's point about time, actually, I want to emphasize that the importance of actually spending the time to do it. Um, Too often, whether it's the sales marketing pitch of like, oh, it's easy to implement. We just flip a switch. It's like, no, it's more complicated than that. Like like, don't get me wrong, there are many products that do great things, but like anything, implementing and then spending the time to, whether it's implementation or looking at what you currently have, and putting that all together to see what overlaps there are, right? So like, along the analysis of the current tech stack, it sounds silly, but make a list. Like, sit down, open up a Word document, and just go down your start menu, go through your bookmarks, and make a list of all the different products that you have and what you use them for. And I think you'll find two things. One, maybe there's overlap, right? What if you're spending a bunch of money on Teams and Zoom at the same time? Well, can you can one of those products be removed so you can save some money? And then on top of that, you train all your staff just on one product as opposed to two products or three products or things like that. But if you do need to ask, if you do need to keep some of those products as an example, and the answer shouldn't be, well, it's just the way it always was, right? That's never a good answer for anything. But if you do need to keep the product, that's where the automation comes in, where you can try to integrate and automate and connect up maybe these some different products together. Something as simple as maybe purchasing something off the shelf like a Calendly to manage your calendars, or and create those Zoom or Teams calls and things like that.
Mhm.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. When I was at NetSuite as a consulting technical manager there, I noticed a lot of trends of folks, companies and firms that had Salesforce and a bunch of different things, and other ERPs, and they were pretty fragmented. They wanted to try to consolidate everything into one system if they could, and that's kind of where you see with some of the larger firms with Workday, HCM, and ERP and financials. They're trying to consolidate because as you grow and scale, it's much harder to manage. Because to Wesley's point, you have to look at the iteration of this. A lot of these SaaS products are going to be having updates every quarter. Are those other ancillary apps that you're spending money on, are those going to be able to stand the test of time with these integrations? Are they still going to be deep? Are they going to be breaking? So it's important to consolidate where you can, from a scalability and as well as cost. They're always having to look like, is my tech stack, as you do a list, is it an asset or is it an expense, in the business? So, and how much time are we, even if you do have a product, how much time are we spending trying to fix things in this product? So you have to bring those into play too.
And I'll also talk about, like, when you look at your current products, also when you do look at the overlap, actually determine if that overlap is something you should try to consolidate. Because if a product basically adds a lot of features just so they can have a nice long checklist of everything they add, but maybe a bunch of those features, let's say a document manager, is implemented poorly, like they got maybe time and billing done correct well and project management, but the document manager is not good, and so maybe it is a good idea to stick with, yeah, a different dedicated document manager and try to automate the two together, as
Mm.
opposed to trying to shoehorn all your people into using a poor product or a poor feature in a product.
Yeah, that's where you have to take the time to really investigate and bring, not just abstract demo data, but like real client data into testing those. Because that is, there could be some aspects of a system that works well enough, but generally these third party apps are, quite a bit more sophisticated than what one of those systems can do. So it's just a matter of, uh, you know building out a strategy and what can I get away with, or what do I want to get away with here. So yeah, you really do have to spend the time though, because I think that, to Wesley's point as well, it really is something that's going to be the most value of just really spending a lot of time understanding where you want to go, and again, having a strategy, to lead that is really important.
Then I want to add, like, kind of,
Yeah.
we're talking time a
Yeah.
little bit. Um, well, the calculus I think people should do with some of this stuff, right, is if they feel like, well, I'm spending so much time on this implementation, but if the time you spend, let's say, you're spending, you know, let's just say 3 hours in one day do working, and you're really focusing on the implementation, but it's going to save the rest of your staff like 3 hours a week every week, for, the entire year. Like, that's definitely, when you're analyzing, like, do that math in your head of, like, how much time am I saving my entire firm, not just me? Um, so that you can make sure that the basically the calculation makes sense, right? If you're automating a process that takes you 30 seconds to do, but you only do it once a year, then there's no point in automating it, right? But if you're automating a
Mm.
process that takes each person in your
Mm.
firm 10 minutes a day, every day, then that's worth automating.
Yeah, no, another thing is just, it's always good to just have polls within different departments. Just what are stress points? What can we, fix? What can we do better on? So having that communication is going to be really key. You don't want to do any of this stuff in a vacuum. But yeah, to those points, you really want to have a lot of good documentation as you're going through this. That's part of helping you grow and iterate into the changes that you're going to be making and future changes that you will be making, because it's not going to stop after that first implementation. But yeah, it looks like a question popped up here.
Yeah, we're rolling right into our discussions. Really cover a lot of the questions, but we will take some of them and dive a little deeper, because that change management, this is something that, it's, if you get it wrong, it can be really wrong. If you get it right, my goodness, what you can accomplish. We're talking about a few elements. One is the communication with the team. Two, again, understanding your processes completely, understanding. Three, what your actual goals and objectives are, and kind of aligning all that up. But let's talk about, the change management and what's the best way. Add some more, maybe some best practices and of how firms can approach, this change management conversation.
Sure.
I'll give it to Wesley first.
Yeah.
So change management, right? Change is scary. Change is a big thing. The first thing I will say is always keep an open mind to change, but also don't change just for change's sake, right? Like make sure that whatever you're exploring, there's at least a potential value to it. Now, like Rob was saying, not, unfortunately, not every attempt at making a change actually becomes a reality. Like I'm just going to be honest in that regard. But the important thing is to keep an open mind, to be open to change in your firm so you don't stagnate. Because what's going to happen, and this is kind of the bad thing, is that if you don't change, the firm that's down the street that is making the changes to get those new efficiencies, whether it's new software, new automations, and things like that, they're going to move ahead leaps and bounds. And then the other thing I'll mention is also, again, having a champion to do the change management who that's their focus. And then kind of the other thing I'll mention is be careful on how much you're trying to change, not because of pushback from people. That's obviously, like I said, change is scary, so people don't want to change too much at a time. But make a list of projects and really only try to implement one or two big things a year, because you still have the rest of the firm, the rest of the business to run. So don't try to. I have a client, and we're trying to implement three major initiatives in 2 months right before tax season, and I finally convinced him, like, let's take one of those and shell it for the summer at least. But we still managed to get 1 and 2 done for the most part. A little rocky, but we got it there. So that's kind of the important thing, is don't bite off more than you can chew. Otherwise, you're going to do a poor job of all of it.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah, those are really strong points. From at a high level, you always want to try to choose the path of highest impact, and making big small bets. But it's very, very easy for you to just try to do too many things and you don't do any of them well. So it's really taking the time and effort to dig into what's going to be valuable. And through that process as well, a lot of the times the change management is the biggest bottleneck you see within the firms, and a lot of it is going to be the people, in the way. So, and it's not necessarily detractors, but a lot of times it's going to be, you're going to have to spend time on turning those detractors into champions, but also finding out what are the liabilities within the business. There's going to be a lot of people in there that maybe just don't have the expertise to move forward with what the strategy is in the business. And again, that's part of the overall pruning process of, hey, look, this could be an actual issue for us as we try to, as everyone's trying to move forward and row together. There's several particular people, and many times it's a partner, but it could be someone in middle management that usually is the bottleneck, and the problem of having these things be move forward effectively. Because at the end of the day, any of these changes, you want to have it to be effective not necessarily efficient, that'll be a result, but they should be somewhat effective, whether it's operationally or client facing. But I think the change management is going to be a bit more smoother when you sit down and have that collaborative effort of, hey, look, we're bringing the teams together. These are the things that we want to do from a strategy standpoint. But a lot of the internal change management, it should be well documented. You should be looking at controllership. You should be looking at security. You're going to be looking at who has access to what. There's a lot of things you uncover through that. Uncover rogue partners or C-suite people. So those are going to be some things that are important about that. But from what I've always seen, though, my biggest issue is it's not an issue, but my biggest challenge that I always have to overcome is being diplomatic and getting these people to work together. Because you're always going to have, the partners are always going to have different kind of KPIs or different metrics. And, it's just a challenge. I know being a facilitator to it, many times I felt like I was babysitting, like to you, Wesley. I'm just trying to get people that don't like each other to work together. And the technology is the easiest piece. In the process is the easiest piece. I'm just trying to get these people to work together for a common goal. And so I had a really good conversation partner that I helped implement years ago. And that was his biggest area. He said he underestimated the most was the people. So, and that's just getting dirty and the real reality of it. Of you have to get these people to work together for a common goal, and getting them to do that process once they're bought in is going to be easy. And getting them to use the technology and that you're consolidating, that you're trying to make better. But that's kind of where I've always seen the big challenge. From small to large, they're just more at stake.
Yeah, definitely. And I've definitely, I'll echo that, because I've had people at my prior firm, people say, can we go 1 year where we don't change something? And and unfortunately, this day and age with the speed of technology, you can't, right? But yes, absolutely. It's people, creating connections with the team members, the staff, and all that. And now, like Rafael said, big and small, change needs to happen. On the plus side, if maybe you're too small, they're just like there's consultants for everything. There are consultants that specialize in just change management. Maybe they're linked to a specific product, to help with implementation of that change. Maybe they're, more on the business process side of things, where they kind of look at everything holistically, determine where, there are gaps or things that can be made more efficient. But I think, the with the change, yeah, it's with change, it's more of a people thing than a technology thing specifically. It's easy for me to import a list of users and add some permissions to a product and all that other stuff. But the thing Rafael has been saying a lot, like documentation, it's building that documentation so that everybody understands how to use the new product, how the firm is using the new product, because every firm uses products slightly differently, right? But then also making it very concise, as well as really making sure that you highlight how this helps people, because once they get that taste of oh, you mean this has made my life easier, usually they jump on board a bit more. Because if you throw in tax season where people are working 60 hours and you say, oh, you can work 45 hours this tax season, I don't think anyone's going to turn that down.
As long as they understand. As long as they understand, yeah, it's almost impossible to turn that down. That's good. That's good. And so, one of the things that that technology and AI and automation, if you do it right, can do for your firm, it helps in the space of cybersecurity. There's I want to talk about that a little bit. Just one of our last couple questions here. There's best practices for implementing AI for cyber to help your cybersecurity, and there's also things you should understand before implementing this. So let's just kind of talk around that and the importance and the pros and cons of this piece. Rafael, you take this first.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to have guidelines. I think workplace AI in the workplace guidelines. You have some firms that completely shut off something like OpenAI to their business. There's policies that are being made and guidelines that are being made. Many firms are actually using ChatGPT to actually build out those guidelines and iterating them for their own business. But um, even if you look, and I do a session on this, but even if you look at OpenAI's security, the compliances, GDPR, CCPA, SOC 2, things of that nature, even though they have them, you still have to look at all of these products from a, you know, from a, try not to be that pessimistic, but then that doesn't really mean anything to me because anything can happen. I've seen it happen and anything can happen. So you have to put in your own guidelines in as a
Right.
business. And
Mhm.
like, you don't rely on that, even if SaaS companies or whatever say this and that, it's good and well, but I have to rely on how my data is could possibly be, breached, or how there's social selling. There's a lot of different ways, like, onboarding, offboarding employees, people that aren't being there any longer, how making sure that that's seamless and never they're cut off from everything. So there's a lot of things that you have to put into place, and I don't think it's going to be terribly different than what you should be doing already, because this is another shiny object that's just around. It'll be around for a little while, but I don't treat it any differently as how I would, let's say, RPA or other ERP systems or other automation tools. I keep it in the same boat. I know, I don't, I just, it's just another shiny object I've seen in the last 20 years. Although it's bigger shiny object, but you just have to keep grounded in that of,
Good
these things.
perspective.
You don't trust them too much. These are all good and well, but you do want to have a really strong, um, security guidelines within your business that you continue to adhere. And so there's a lot of great templates out there, a lot of alliances that we work with, have roundtables, and they learn from their peers, and building out some of the framework that they're dealing with. But I think those are some, just keeping grounded and trying to continue to do that is a good frame of mind.
That's good. That's good. Have your pessimistic and your optimistic lenses on. Have both. Okay.
I mean, Wesley and I've seen it, man. We get sold all the time, and you have firms that come out here, they'll come to me and they want to ask, just, okay, I've been sold this, but what does this really look like in the implementation side? Because it's a different, you get sold bells and whistles, and it looks pretty, but then when you get in, that stuff was already pre-built, and it takes going to be a little bit more effort to build that customization out. So, yeah,
Right.
you can't fall into that trap.
Yeah. And, along, some of the lines of AI and cybersecurity and guidelines and stuff like that. So, a few things with like my belief on AI, right, is that first of all, if you're going to use any AI product, make sure you're paying for it. It sounds silly, but I can't remember. There's a salesperson or something like that that says that if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product, right? Your data is the product. That's why if you're using free chat GPT, they're like, we're going to use anything you put into this to train our next model, which means now that data's out in the open. So, um, and then but I always layer on top of that is that assume anything you're putting out there, that company is going to use in some form or another to build their product, right? I mean, if you make that's my pessimistic side of things, where if you make that assumption, we're like, hey, the data that's getting put out there is used. I was talking with this is not kind, but this is having to do with insurance and HIPAA, so like patient data and stuff like that. And the companies that have all that data charge extra to access that data outside, like if you're trying to create an integration or something like that, because it's not so much the patients, right? I mean, there's the insurance companies and all that, but the patients aren't necessarily paying for those portals. And what they're doing, these companies, is they package the data so that other businesses can connect up to it, right, for good purposes, right, like maybe a hospital or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But just my point is that I always just make an assumption that any data I put out there is going to be used by a company in some form or another. Now, we've learned to accept that, right? We all use Microsoft products, we use Apple products, things like that, and it's just part of life as we've accepted it. at such point, but just you just make sure you understand that. But then from a cybersecurity perspective, that's where you got to make sure. Okay, you want to make sure you have a good control over your data. Bad actors are stealing data, but if companies are saying, well, it's okay, we're all encrypted, so they can't access it. Well, quantum computing is pretty much around the corner, and once the quantum computing it
Mm.
has reached a critical mass enough where it can make those decryption calculations on those encryption algorithms, then honestly, all modern encryption is going to be kind of useless, right? So there's a bit of the scary, the scary future. But I believe the NSA, they're already working on new encryption models that are
Mhm.
quantum computing proof. So so there's a pessimist, but
Quantum
optimistically,
computing proof. That's
quantum computing proof.
that's a term I didn't we didn't know we would hear.
Yeah, it's the new world that we're moving into, right, with technology. But really, the important thing is for best practices when utilizing these things is just having the understanding, spending the time documenting everything, and knowing where all your data is going. Because not only is it going to help you understand where there's liability, but it's also going to help you understand where there are opportunities, right?
Mm.
And then that's where you can then build up and add new automations that will maybe connect two different systems. Something as simple as downloading source documents from one system for tax purposes and uploading it to another system where you actually do your work papers, right?
Mm.
And maybe that work paper system will do autofill for you, and then it goes into your tax system. So just kind of links and chain of automation, and kind of those ideas. So I think
Mm.
that's it's kind of my thought. So there's a pessimistic side, and then I threw on the optimistic side of like, but here's some cool automations you can do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, with AI, there's certainly definitely a trend on the data integrity side of the house of because you can from like data synthesis to augmenting data, and those are going to be helpful from a security standpoint where you're being able to use like if you have your own large language model or small language model for that matter. You've seen some folks doing that in Azure and other tools that exist out there, but um, there are certainly a lot of opportunities, but you just have to look at um, these things again from a different lens, not rose colored, not rose
Mhm.
colored lenses. So that's really the point of it.
Well, it's interesting, Raphael, you're talking about, with companies that are running their own data models. So, the one important thing to keep in the back of your mind, if you are doing something like that, is to make sure your data is clean. Like, very often I've walked into firms and then there is just, for lack of a better word, dirty data, whether it's incorrect data or we have data in three different systems and they don't talk to each other. So we don't know which one is necessarily correct. Usually the default is, well, look at the tax software because that's what we have to file, right? But the important thing is if you're building those language models and you're basing it off of incorrect data, that's
Mm.
going to, the term if I remember it correctly, is poison your model. They
Mm.
actually did a test once where, for those image generating models or image identifying models, they were trained it to identify dogs. But then they fed it, I think it was like 10 images of a cat and said, oh, this is a dog. And basically it broke the model. The model was no longer able to identify what was a cat, dog, other animal, things like that.
Mm.
Yeah, and
Oh,
this is
goodness.
that's a really good point, and the point that I've something that I've always practiced with any technology is it's only as good as the data. You want to make sure that data is standardized from the master data that being feeds into transactional data that's out there because it's from an automation standpoint. Let's say you're automating something and some of the data isn't standardized. Some of the rigid rule sets you built into it, doesn't fall in line with some of the data that you have out there if it's based on those kind of things, and that causes a lot of roadblocks and issues. But it's within modernizations and these implementations and transformations that I've done throughout my career, a lot of it is data cleanup. A lot of the time is spent on data cleanup. So
Mhm.
that's again, whether it be automation or just you're starting anew. But to Wesley's point, if you have your own models or any of that data, if you're trying to use AI for FP&A reporting, things like that, you're only as good as the data that you have and you're going to spend time constantly trying to clean things up. And if you don't clean them up, as you get more clients and more data coming in, it's just going to be a much bigger task to fix that down the line.
And
That's big.
to Rafael's points, I know we're over time, but just
Ooh,
on
good.
that for the data cleanup side of things, this is like the one piece of like advice or recommendation I would recommend for every firm, no matter. And you know, as you get smaller, maybe it's not as big of an issue. Use a centralized client identifying system, basically a single source of truth that is
Mm,
universal to all your platforms. Ideally for me, like I tell people, start with the number 10,000. So it's a 5-digit client number, but the first one's always one, and just move up sequentially as clients come, go. The number, it dies. You never use it again. You can go 6-digit if you have that many clients. But the idea is that you use that number across every single platform that you have. Now you have a single source of truth to connect
mm,
everything up. So if an email address is incorrect in one versus another, you include a middle initial, even just an extra comma on a business name no longer becomes a problem, because then when you want to step in with automation, you just say, well, we have a client numbering system and that is universal.
mm.
Then people like us come in and we can be like, great, we can automate, and everything's just based off that.
I like that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of when you're doing, for instance, you're moving from one large system to another, you'll usually they have different client ID sequences, and so you'll create a custom field in the new system that has the old client ID, and you can map those up. And that's going to be really important. And a lot of times they'll actually change the sequencing for all new clients in the new system. They all start with 7,000 moving up. So, that's why it's really, really important. So, okay, this is some data that we'll have that maybe was a bit antiquated, that were from an old system, and you have cutoffs. So all of that's going to be really important for data cleanup, and then understanding and quickly identifying what's, BC and AD within a new, modernization. So those are all really important. So.
Yeah, good distinction. Good distinction. That's great. Well, why don't we do this? Well, so we're coming in for a landing here. Why don't we give our best piece of advice, and then also close out with how folks can get in contact with you. Well, Wesley, you can go first. So share your best piece of advice, and then also how folks can get in contact with you.
Ooh, that's a fun question. What's my best piece of advice? I would say probably the best piece of advice is that, especially as business runners and firm owners, is your goal should be to automate and delegate anything that you really don't want to do. Um, that's, I think, my best piece of advice. I mean, that's what you should. If it's something you don't want to do, delegate it. If it's something that's consistent across the business, automate it. Like, remove that task away, because one, usually you want to work on stuff that you like to work on and that you enjoy. That's why you started a business. It's not necessarily all the ancillary work that comes to it, right? And then so delegate, automate, and then find the right people, whether it's consultants that'll help you on the outside, for a fractional basis, or you have people on the inside, and you empower your staff to take on those roles. Because one of the things at my prior firm, I used to kind of joke, but I was kind of a mad engineer. I could bring random ideas and concepts and thoughts and just stuff like that and try it out. It also helps if I can do it at a low cost. They always liked that. But the idea is that you know bring with change, with automation and all that other stuff, empower your people, delegate and automate that work away, and let them just have a moment, and let them really own that, because I feel like the staff will actually have kind of a better experience when they're like, hey, this is something I did.
Yeah, it's good. Oh, and how
Yeah,
how can folks get in
Oh,
contact with
right.
you?
Right, that. Um, so you can go to my website, automatapracdev.com. I'm on LinkedIn. You can connect with me there or message me. You can email me, whartman at automatapracdev.com. I specialize in automation for firms, so that basically firm runners and staff don't have to do work that a computer can do.
I love that. basically show you how to delegate and automate.
Yep.
Yes, fantastic. Thanks, Wesley. And of course, Rafael and Wesley, both their information will be in the description, in the comments, and you can find their links readily available. Rafael?
Yeah, no, and Wesley's the man, so definitely ping him. He's great, really sharp guy. But I just wanted to, in closing, is don't FUD yourself. You hear this terminology, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You really kind of come at these things as challenges and opportunities. You don't want to get bought into that mindset of this is taking my job, this is going to crush my business. From the cloth that Wesley and I come from, we always look at these things like, well, let's see what I can break. Let's see how good this thing really is, And so come at it with that of like, I have an opportunity here. Let me see what this thing can really do for me. But the biggest thing I've seen throughout the years is people just get they're just sold from pundits on fear and uncertainty and doubt. And you've got to do this and that and this, and you don't have to do all that, but you want to look at it from a lens of, let me look at my business and myself and see what I can really do with these types of technologies that exist out there. And again, focused on the people. That's what's going to make this moving in the right direction.
Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Yeah. Yeah, definitely don't FUD yourself. That's a horrible thing to do. You're always going to regret it.
And you can find me on LinkedIn and email me as well at rafael.casas@quickfee. And I'm on Twitter too. But it's always appreciative and an honor to be here. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. And thank you, everyone, for listening, watching. And I hope you got something out of this. And I hope you took some notes. And most importantly, I hope you took or take some action, because knowledge is power, but wisdom is the proper application of that knowledge. So let's get wise, folks. Let's keep our firms running, scaling, and the people inside there happy. Because let me tell you something. If you could find a way to take the redundant work away from your team, if you could find a way to take the repetitive processes off of someone's plate, and then be able to reallocate that energy in a beautiful way, you will see your firm leaps and bounds in almost every category. These are the gentlemen you want to talk to, you want to follow, and learn more about. Wesley, Rafael, thanks again for being on the Automation Nation podcast.
Thank you so much. It was great being here.
And until next time.
Thank you.
Automation.